City of Stevens Point Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission, recorded December 10, 2019.
Pardon my interruptions. We'll call this meeting to order. No worries. It's 6:01 here in Stevens Point. Welcome to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission with our huge crowd. Johannes, welcome. How you doing? Do roll call.
Rourke.
Here.
Fehrenbach. Here. O'Mara.
Here.
Dugan.
Here.
Fischler.
Here.
Corbin.
Here.
We have everyone present.
Awesome. Okay. So item 2 is persons who wish to address the commission for up to 3 minutes on a non-agenda item. Any commissioners?
Does that include us?
That includes us.
Okay, can I go on and on again about Stanley Street?
You could. I can't stop you.
I don't know if it'll
I don't know
get
if
you
we
where you want to
need
go.
to.
Okay, well, I just want to say it again, I guess. I took a real beating in that, as the alderperson in that area, the main alderperson in that area. And I still am hearing from constituents who just hate Stanley Street, the new improvements. And I just wish we could tweak it a bit so that, number one, we don't have speeding. We have the same speeding that we had before. I thought it would calm the traffic, and it's not. Now, we'd have to measure that to make sure that I'm correct. And then secondly, it was just a secondary thing for me. It would be nice to have bike lanes there. That wasn't the main reason for it. I wanted it to calm traffic. But, well, we've got I guess they're wide enough. Like Mike said, they're wide enough, 5 feet. Yeah, but they're not marked. And so people have asked me, well, is there a bike lane there or not, And I think it might be, if we've got that area and we're not doing anything else with it, I hope we can put maybe some markings on the road, or, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that's
Oh, you can't
non-agenda,
talk about-
yes,
you can't-
non-discussion.
Yep, anyway.
Okay.
Generally, going 4 to 3 with a road diet offers some real benefits. And sometimes it's extra green space. Well, we don't have that because we're keeping the pavement. So I do hope that we can, number one, slow them down with enforcement, and number 2, get some markings on the bike lane so people know they can use that. And so that people in cars might slow down a little bit too. That's my offering for tonight.
All right. Any other commissioners? Okay, I will bring up one item, and that's, it was a recommendation from a council member, I think last meeting, that if we didn't have a larger turnout for evening meetings, that we consider pushing this back to daytime to accommodate staff. Seeing that, I know our audience is huge here, no offense, but you are a rock star. I think we should consider moving it. And if there's any objection, we're not voting now, obviously, but maybe if you could do like a doodle poll or something, Kyle?
Sure. Yep, I can send something out in an email.
Okay.
Make sure you just respond to me, and then I'll try to coordinate what the best time would be.
Okay, and I think if possible, to accommodate the public the most in that purview would be to try to catch the lunch hour, so regular working people can still attend. They're taking lunch.
Yeah, I was thinking, that's one option. Otherwise, I was thinking late afternoon, 3 or 4, as a possibility as well. If there's a topic that, somebody would like to speak on or would like to attend a meeting, I think they could realistically sneak out of work early.
Sure.
In the event they wanted to speak, and I think 3 or 4 would afford them that opportunity. But certainly lunch hour could work as well, so I'll base that off of the responses.
3 or 4 or 7 a.m.?
7 a.m.
No, and I'm not kidding. That's a good time for public meetings.
What do you think,
People
Maria?
attend, and they
It's
do
earlier.
not drag on.
That's workout time, sorry. Already done.
I guess based on a working guy with a family,
Yeah,
there's no way before 5 PM.
no way before 5.
Yeah, I mean, most of the guys I work with are, just working families.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, I mean, to get out of work or to do this, there's
Can't
no,
do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a dilemma,
Was the attendance better before when we did it during the
Yeah.
day?
slightly,
Was it?
slightly.
Again, it's dependent upon topic, I think.
Topic and the ability to get here on a bicycle on a nighttime meeting doesn't do that.
So I guess if
Staff,
you
do
can
you-
throw some times out?
I certainly
Do
will.
you get, do you flex your hours? Do you get paid extra, or is this just,
I'm salary, so it doesn't matter to me, really.
Yeah,
I'll,
they're, in terms of hourly, I'm an hourly employee, and when I'm here after hours, it is comp time, so it's time and a half. But just keep in mind that overall, this spans over across all meetings, that there is a budget, that eventually, I'm like, I can't come to the meeting. That's never happened before, and last year we had way more meetings, general special meetings, so I don't foresee that being an issue. But
I will say that given the involvement from other departments, given the topics on this commission, Public Works, PD, our office and community development, it's probably easier to do a daytime meeting because a lot of the directors and the staff are attending nightly meetings on a regular basis, and this would be in addition to those nightly meetings that already exist, so I think it would be easier for them to attend a daytime meeting and provide more input if it were a daytime meeting.
All right, so I guess,
I will summarize in an email and try to
Okay.
get that out this week.
and then for Nick's sake, include the evening hour anyway?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other items, non-agenda items from the commission or the audience? All right. Moving on to item 3, for discussion and possible action. Report of the November 12th, 2019 meeting. Any motion?
move to accept?
Second. Okay, I think that was that Michael?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion. There's one, I think it's just basically removing a second, because there's 2 copies, I think, in there?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So just removing a second copy
I got confused.
from the packet and minutes. Any other discussion?
Yeah, the meeting, I don't think was adjourned at 6:14, if it started at 6:07.
Makes sense, makes sense. Do you remember the time?
Probably 7:14.
Could have been 7:14?
That was part of my confusion.
No,
Was
it
that
wasn't
the
a
walking tour
7
that
meeting.
adjourned at 6:14, or was that?
Here? and
Yeah,
gone.
that's probably it. The walking tour was over at 6:14 because we got back here late.
But then
that's
we,
where I grabbed it.
but then we
Yep.
adjourned, then the meeting started at 6:07. Also.
I'll update it.
Cool, thank you, Maria. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And none appro, no abstentions either? Okay, we're good. Motion carries. Moving on to item 4. Review and discussion of Transportation Alternative Grant 2016 draft designs provided by the consultant Short Elliott Hendrickson Incorporated, or otherwise known as SEH. Okay, so if you see pages 11 through 18 of the packet, I did spend a bunch of time going through, and I created a memo. There are a lot of concerns I had throughout the design, and I recommended edits or changes on each page of the draft. So these will be submitted to staff, and then staff will submit to SEH. And then really, let's discuss any further concerns or questions the commission or the audience might have, public might have. But we're not really going to review page by page tonight, because you did get this packet, and we had received the draft a month and a day ago or something.
I also went through and I saw that you wanted to go to the 6-inch lines instead of the 4-inch lines. It's a two-edged sword because traffic lines are so slippery. You have a much better chance of recovering on a 4 than a 6. And they really are. They get to be icy, slick when they're wet. There isn't much you can do to get around that. And because of the way the lines are, they're, for the most part, they're parallel to the roadway. They are quite visible. You don't need the additional width. I beg to differ with you on that, Mr. Chairman. And it's just something for us to consider, because we've been having there's a lot of stuff going on with crosswalks for that same reason, the big whited out crosswalks. They're having real trouble with people falling on them because we really don't have a real good non-slip paint. Just something to consider.
That is, yeah, something to consider. Thanks.
The one other thing is, on Main Street and Clark Street, they got the cross-sections completely wrong. Those were designed with the metric equivalent of 12 and 14 feet already, and they put it down as though that didn't exist. And and that means that you have room on the right lane on both of them. You have a 14-foot outside lane, which you could really do things for bicycle accommodation with that. And it seems to be that there wasn't a whole abundance of care on this first draft. I don't think that they measured. I think there was a lot of windshieldding.
I would concur. Especially the intersections, as I pointed out in the kind of the overview. And so, as a bicyclist or someone even walking, the intersection is the most dangerous and potentially most dangerous point because of all the conflict points that you have, and potentially at speeds that are sometimes higher than the speed limit because people try to beat that yellow light.
Right.
So, and we're all guilty of that. So yeah, those intersections are very important to get right.
I do want to note that those that have comments should submit them by the end of the week if possible, whether that's red line copies or a summary in an email to myself or the Director of Public Works. It is our intent to summarize the comments and provide a thorough review to SEH either by the end of this week or early next week, certainly before the holiday season, so we can stay in line with the design timeline for completion early next year, so that when next summer rolls around, we can get the infrastructure installed.
Thank you, Kyle. Other commissioners on feedback, concerns, questions?
I was simply overwhelmed by how much work you did. And, you really obviously appreciate that.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Here you are.
No other comments from commissioners? Yes, go ahead.
The only thought I had was just to elaborate maybe on some page numbers on these comments, just to give a little bit more clarification. So I just
sure.
kind of made some detailed notes here, and I can submit those to you if
Sure.
that's helpful. I just think sometimes it's helpful to have just some concrete examples as to what you're talking about on this first page.
Yeah. Agreed. Thank you. Yeah, so just like Associate Planner Kern said, if you could submit that as well as everybody else, submit your other feedback or even corrections if I have any mistakes in there too, to Kyle as soon as possible. Anyone in the audience have any questions, concerns, feedback? No? All right, thank you. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5. Recommendations for 2020 street reconstruction projects. So as Kyle brought up on the screen there, if you look at pages 19 through basically the end of the packet, let's see, 38, 19 through 38. So I ran through in this memo the background, including 2 walking rolling audits, descriptions of the recommendations, and some pages of resources, references, and notes on the recommendations I have included. And there, I'll just mention the 3, because obviously you've gone through the packet. The three recommendations are, 1, to change typical cross-sections as listed in the memo. 2, to add bump outs as mapped. And then 3, working with WPS at a later date to improve street lighting along each block of Price, Jersey, Sims, and 4th Avenues and Streets. So that is up for discussion.
What I did like was their typical sections, they show the 14-foot. And that allows you to get a bicycle and a vehicle next to each other and be comfortable. And if you, if you choke off the travel lane and, you know, put a bike lane next to it, if it's choked off, they just go into the travel, or into the bike lane for you. And so, I really like the 14-foot. You wouldn't do that except in an urban section that you already got. It's an access, not a necessarily arterial, but it does allow you. I know the 14-foot outside lane on Main and Clark Street, the right lanes, they're not bad to be in, even with all that traffic. And I go in and I use them a lot.
Yeah?
I have never, no, even with semis.
I would disagree. I've used them before.
Well, you gotta be on the right side, can't be on the left side.
Typically on the right side. You gotta also think, Michael, not to be
You have a trailer.
discouraging. Well, trailer, but also those that are younger than us, as well as older than us.
But I think we have to,
Or they might not have the abilities we do, or comfort.
I understand that, and there aren't many cyclists that are much older than me. I might add that. But there's no one that's 20 years older. But at any rate, even when a semi goes by, you don't get a whole lot of side draft off of it. And I think when we do these bicycle deals, you can't design for the 10-year-old. And you can't design for the 85-year-old. You have to go someplace in the middle.
I don't know if I'd say never.
No, if you were in Holland, they don't design for the 10-year-old.
They do, because I've seen it. 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds.
Yes, but
We
not
have-
every
yeah.
street. They're not going on the double roundabout.
Anyway, I've seen it before, Michael, and I would disagree.
Okay,
I've experienced it, ridden it, and I disagree. But
Okay.
anyway,
but at any rate,
you can design it differently, and that's part of the point, part of the reason we exist.
yes. No, I agree with that. I'm just saying that if, in order to get the most effect, sometimes we have to prioritize. We don't want to spend $100,000 a mile to make something have bicycle accommodation and shortchange all the other streets.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's all about priorities, right? Other commissioners and questions, concerns? How was the basketball game, Scott? Woo, we won? All right, thumbs up. I don't know, we haven't, I guess, welcoming Scott here. I don't know if you wanted to provide the commission with any feedback on the memo or recommendations?
Yeah, I suppose I can otherwise do that. I think one of the biggest things is the, timeliness. And today alone, I just received the link to the 50% design review for this project. I had presented this some time ago, so the timeliness of which is not very good. So I would tend to think without having what it is, even within there, if we followed this and there was some cost savings, which, we would probably lose in redesign as well as time for bidding. The other aspect of it is that, much of what's otherwise presented here is one-dimensional, unfortunately to say. It looks at the service and trying to get some safety features in there, and I certainly appreciate that. Unfortunately, in the world of engineering, we're held to many constraints. Fremont, we narrowed where we otherwise could. It really, even that 1 foot you want to narrow it, would send us back to redesign of all the utilities. It's a corridor that's full of utilities. It was narrowed to a point where we felt we could fit the utilities. There's our constraint. Can't narrow it any farther. Unless we want to go to variance to the DNRs while we're pushing things together. Simply saying that we just want to narrow the road has never worked in the past. To say we do this unless there would be a substantial amount of data behind it to say that it has to be relocated.
So, sorry, just to understand that, you're saying the utilities won't fit if the curb to curb is narrowed any more
Correct.
than the 14?
So rather as working that is within there, because there are a number of utilities. In addition to just the standard public utilities, there are actually utilities that belong to the university, or serve the university within that corridor. So we've narrowed it up to what we felt was appropriate to fit within there. There is some, based upon our design, I wouldn't say in design that it's otherwise substandard, but generally in location and how it proceeds itself together is some unique qualities within the designs as far as how in the location of the sanitary ladder, which in most cases will go down the center of the road, in this case does not. So moving that farther out to keep it within the roadway would probably create additional costs even in utility construction, which would offset any potential cost that you've identified in saving. So that's just, and there we have the constraints. I also talked with the fire department. They, of course, do have some concerns as they usually do. And I think it's important before we make recommendations like this that we consult with them before we throw that out and try to think we're going to make. Again, I hate to use the word, but it is just kind of read the memo. It's one-dimensional. In the engineering world, we never work in one dimension. So I don't think it's a fair document to present to try to make any recommendations on because it's incomplete. So I think that, while there's lots of good stuff in there, we do account for all this when we come into the initial design. So these have been things that we have thought about in staff, talked to, and we do talk to the other departments to try to sort of this. We look at all the constraints we have, and we make decisions. Even in addition, I had just received a response from the university today from Chris Brinley, and it just seems that, in his request, I know when we talked about the agenda and stuff, it was kind of presented, you had some changes, and I know, Trevor, you had talked to him specifically about his sidewalk constraints, and it was interesting because what he told me was, much as I suspected, was very different from what I think you gathered from him. His request to me was to extend the width of the sidewalk the whole length of Fremont and eliminate the terrace on there.
You didn't say that in person.
Opposite to what he has.
Okay.
I even have it on the voicemail if you want to listen to it.
No, I believe you. I just.
It's there. So I think it's part of that.
Too
We
bad.
also try to incorporate what they have and what we do. So,
Okay.
I think you even had some comments in there about snow storage. The reality is that as long as you maintain a path through that sidewalk, whether it's concrete or grass, you can use that excess sidewalk as snow storage. So there's no laxness. Snow storage is determined by the back of sidewalk. That's really the determining factor in where your snow storage is. So if you have, assuming you maintain a 5-foot walk, if you've got 10 feet of sidewalk, you still have 5 feet of snow storage, regardless of whether it's, paved in or not, because we're not going to come in and require someone, Mark Cordes is going to come in and fine someone for not clearing the entire width of that. So, different than if you had a 5-foot walk that was, the back of the walk was 5 feet behind the curb. In that case, because you're abutting the curb, you don't have that sort, and we do try to, minimize those. So, while I can appreciate the memo, I just think when taken into context and looked in with the other constraints we have and talking to other staff and looking at all the uses of the corridor, including the utilities and talking to the fire department, I just, we've already kind of gone through that at staff. we have narrowed those streets, we've put them together. I think we have a reasonable approach to it, and, even that we've already took that to design, which is to the 50% mark. So, if this body wanted to try to do something, I think it would be a costly change, for one, and I'm not sure we can necessarily accommodate everything that is laid out in there anyways, so.
So possibly quick question. So to look at process and timeline, so the capital budget's approved November, I think, correct?
The capital budgeting is otherwise presented in October. And then the operational budget is in November.
Okay, so
That doesn't mean that
capitals-
there still aren't potentially changes to it, but
Right.
Usually we're given authorization to proceed into next year's spending in October after the council meeting, so.
So in a realistic review of alternatives like this, it would make sense to have this as like a side-by-side or completely vetted over the summer, essentially, and then your capital says, okay, here's X and then here's Y. What are the cost differences? What's realistic? So in other words, by capital, this memo's too late.
Correct. For that, but I'm not sure, unless we're looking at things that are going to substantially increase the cost. Like, for example, getting away from reconstructs, but still next year's project, say Walter Street. If it was just presented at this time that we wanted to add, pedestrian accommodations within that street like that, I would say it's a no-go exactly because of the capital reasons. We wouldn't have had budgeted enough funds to pay for that.
Right.
Now, if we're talking about smaller things in here, minor changes that, from the capital perspective, we do try to budget sufficiently to account for at least a small amount of unknown.
Sure, yeah.
We do include a contingency there. We don't try to budget it to the dollar.
Right.
So I would think within here, and the magnitude of the changes you're looking at here, could probably be absorbed within, our basic budgeting process.
Okay.
You start to, of course, getting beyond that, it's more so just a matter of the timing to make sure we go into that. It's the timing of trying to get to the consultant so that we can get something back in a manner that we can then bid. So we're looking to get it for, as early in the year as we otherwise can to get the best bid prices. And we've had experiences here recently since I've been here where we haven't hit that target and had some very expensive things. Isidore Street being, the example, and you're looking at the bid tabs, it's an outlier in there that we paid an exorbitant amount to get Isidore Street done. We don't want to repeat that. So we're on the timeline more so just to get to that, in that window of opportunity. So we need to get the design so we can get out on the street. So it's more importantly, as far as the timing is, to get these decisions all made before we get to our consultant. And that is usually, going to happen, we want to have that project probably prepared in September so that we're getting quotes from everybody. So as soon as we get the budget approved in October, we're ready to sign an agreement, because we don't want to wait, any longer than that, just to ensure that we have the time as we get through here. We always lose time, just like anyone else. The holidays always take time out from consultants. Sometimes they want to spend time with their families as well, and, we hope that they do. So, we need to account for that. So this winter time frame gets a little bit stretched out. So to make sure we others get that, we really want to start as soon as we can in October, right after that council meeting, to get our consultant going. So in order to have that ready to form, we're really looking for probably a month advance to that, to make sure that we have everything put together in a scope of work and an understanding of that work so that they can design that. They can give us an accurate estimate on the cost to do that, and then we're not, changing, things as we go along.
Okay. Questions or concerns for the director?
I think when you mentioned the DNR, you're talking about the separation of sanitary sewer and the water, so that we don't
Yes.
slurp sanitary sewage into your water line.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of
That's
sense.
the reason
Makes a lot
why
of
this is
sense.
going on.
Yes, and because of the constraints and just where things are otherwise previously located and how we
Yes.
do with it, and what the university has there as well, we've got a narrow area within the roadway that we can place the water main that keeps that it's an 8-foot separation distance from there, minimum. But then we also need to concern ourselves if we ever need to get repair in there, we don't necessarily, we aren't gonna put a utility like directly beneath the curb. That gets very expensive to do any future repair. We want to make sure that we're off the curb far enough such that we could excavate there with trench boxes to save the curb and gutter, at least have an opportunity to do that. So in those first, repairs, we're not replacing all that behind it. That's where it gets expensive. Doing an asphalt patch is one thing, replacing curb, gutter, sidewalk, that also becomes a challenge. And you often end up with areas too where if you do need to make that repair, you need to go a little bit beyond even the excavation of where you want to, just to make sure you don't end up with, you get good compaction. Otherwise, that's where you sometimes will see little dips, and then you got water collecting in the curb and gutter because the flow line is interrupted. And so, we do try to keep those things thinking forward. If we ever need to get back in there for any reason, we can do that. And of course, we don't want them too far out because you don't want to have, manholes in the wheel wells, in the wheel paths. Ideally, they sometimes end up there. But those are just some of the constraints that we do need to deal with. And unfortunately, just that Fremont is just one of those. High Street on the other side doesn't have those same constraints. Illinois doesn't have those same constraints. There just aren't as many utilities flowing in underneath that roadway. But Fremont, unfortunately, does.
So can recommendation for High Street be taken separately, or is that a possibility?
It could. I'm trying to remember ways. I have to admit, I spent most of my time looking at Fremont Street. I don't remember specifically how is it possible to look on the tab there. I know I was still waiting for the firemen to come back to me because they had a concern because they run that daily as part of their route. I don't understand the process, what they do or how they operate daily, which isn't mine to understand, but I know they run that option, and they were, Assistant Chief Moody was telling me when we met out there that very concerned about having the bump out, as you kind of had identified there, as just an operational concern for them as far as even navigating through, the university area. But I don't know the specifics of it. I asked them for clarification. I haven't fortunately received that yet from them. So I'm a little reluctant on what we're doing there. As well as I know, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Hansel, Greg Hansel at the school there to see too exactly how they do drop-offs. My understanding how they utilize that space behind it would benefit honestly from having the bus departures and stuff and pickup there to have that concrete just much the way it is. I think it became that way in part because it functions best for the users in the area, being the church and school and stuff. So I'm a little reluctant on that one as well, and I apologize. I just haven't had enough time to review it. I would ask that nothing otherwise be changed. I know we probably want to change. I don't want to change just for the sake of the fact that we can. Again, we did try to narrow the street. We did try to think about what was. We talked to the others and staff and such to come up with what we did. I think it's reasonable. And we really ask just that we leave it alone. Again, there would have to be redesign costs associated with that to go back to our consultant. So I'm trying to think. Of course, the eyes of what they look at. I need to get closer.
Yeah, that was mostly just
The most part is just, the sidewalk.
reducing the sidewalk by 2 feet and then reducing the travel lane by a foot per side
And what was the advantage of reducing the travel lane?
to accommodate a terrace. So you add an additional
Yes.
buffer between people walking and the travel lane.
What if you, because it's gonna, what about putting a colored concrete strip there to designate the terrace area to keep them off?
I don't know if that would work with snow.
The
removal.
problem with oh yeah, it would. We'd have it downtown.
See, like a concrete what?
They have colored concrete on the area next to the sidewalk, between the curb and the sidewalk, to designate that is not the through sidewalk.
Oh, I see.
Right. It establishes
Because the
furniture
trouble
zone.
is, you ever tried to grow anything in a 2-foot strip?
So if it's 3, you could do bushes. Probably not trees.
But they'll all be dead.
Fruiting trees,
Yeah,
maybe.
we typically don't like to put, trees and stuff, because we don't want to put anything that would otherwise create any sort of like hedgerow or anything that otherwise blocks. It's like, you're generally looking for something that would have, in a 3-foot, I don't know what the forester allow. I'm not sure
Yeah.
there's anything there, because typically Forester Ernster is looking for a 5-foot minimum for any sort of planting. Now, a shrubbery of sort, depending on what it is. But again, you're typically looking for something that has just a trunk. You want to replace it with something cylindrical, in that viewing, area there. So thinking about children that may be walking by so that they can see that, so they can also be seen, on the sidewalk, anyone approaching there with, to park their car or do whatever. So shrubs really, at least as I picture them, and I don't know exactly what you have in view, it just would not be that. So it would probably be grass. And yeah, we often do struggle with areas there when we start to narrow it down there and you get to about that 2 foot mark, 1 foot nearly everywhere people do that. We usually get the requests and then to fill that in later. And we fill in, because even just recently after a long time at St. Steve's, I know I just filled theirs in on Clark Street because there was, I think it was I want to say 1.5 foot. And it just became a maintenance because people would park there to, parishioners and stuff to use it. And when they parked there, it just became a hassle to try to clean it up. So, they'd asked, could they just replace it with concrete? So I think that whole stretch from intersection Dictionary Lock there on Clark is now concreted. It just seems to be the way, people do want convenience of maintenance, provided the sidewalk is adequate. So again, I try to go to the back of sidewalk. So if the back of walk is still in, in a reasonable area though, even though there's concrete, in front of that, it still provides them adequate there. Most people just by nature don't walk, right behind the curb. They usually otherwise walk, behind there. So that furniture zone is often maintained by people just by behavioral, needs, alone. No one wants to walk in that space. We could look at some of the other things such as, a colored concrete or stamped concrete or something like that, just to help, delineate what that is. That would also then help the school to keep that area clean so they could get the buses and drop off kids and stuff. Because the other, concern too is if you have people dropping off into that, and we see this around the university, which is one of the concerns I at one point even argued with the university about it. But, the reality is that it's sometimes hard to change people's behaviors. And then you also just get kids, and even university kids are probably some of the worst. And I guess maybe I will not change the use of the word kids. I guess too, as I get older, they just seem to be
Students,
younger.
just say students, it's safer.
Students, yeah, let's
Yes.
do that. But there is then, they will just stumble one way or the other to get up and over that snowbank if it's otherwise left there as well. And that's not a safe manner. That I've seen some of them just, you want to get from here to there, and I don't want to walk to the crosswalk. I'm going to walk, and I don't like it. It'd be nice to think that we could direct them to utilize the crosswalks, so we have them marked and it's the safest for them to utilize. But I still also want to acknowledge that, if it's easier for them to maintain, and the students, are reluctant to utilize them anyways, sometimes, just the way it is now, I can otherwise see as being a safer approach, although I may not agree with that. I'd like to think something different of it. In practice, when I see it, it's enough to convince me that we have not created an unsafe condition. We've probably at best just created as equal, anyways, a safe condition, whether we have that sidewalk right being, extended right behind the curb, or if we were to put some grass and stuff there too. Because a little bit of grass, most likely they're going to try to clear out anyways and not necessarily use it as snow storage. Just to do the means by which they do snow removal, as well as they'll often just try to clean it up just to make it easy for people to drop, students off, or, even
The other thing is
daycare.
it becomes a mud hole.
And it often does when you get there, because people will do that, especially in the spring. It's difficult to do it, and that's usually then when we get the requests to, to fill it in with something.
And you see what happens is, because the sidewalk is tilted towards the curb, if you put any de-icer on the sidewalk
Like
at
it
all, you
drains.
kill all of that grass. And it's so narrow,
So, yeah, until we
it
can
just
get.
doesn't work.
Yeah, especially, so, again, I would ask that at least we leave, this one. I think the real approach is that to look towards the future. I tend to think we have reasonable designs, throughout. We did what we could as far as narrowing them down, trying to work with those, surrounding entities, as well as, other entities within the city, staff, to come up with them. And I think really if we want to have more involvement and input into that, we really look to next year. As I've presented to this body, it's my plan to try to get to a point where hopefully, we're a complete year in advance of getting, things ready. We may not necessarily say you have the final design, but we've got all those design things, worked out. And, that's taken, time to get there. And we continue to do more and more. I can tell you we've already completed the survey for the 21, projects, the site survey. We're working on all the right-of-way issues right now, trying to make sure we have all the understanding and documentation for that. we're working very diligently to try to get to a point where we can get caught up. And I think, later in 2020, we'll be hiring a city engineer to assist with things that will only help, trying to keep up on those timelines. Because I think there's nothing better that we can otherwise do than try to get those things done, ahead of time. Because, if we can get those things started up and try to work nearly a year in advance, it helps in many cases, because one, we'll start getting out there to get notice to residents and businesses in the area that will be impacted, because sometimes we're making little changes, like even this year, it came into the capital budgeting aspect when we had to remove some of the road work we were hoping to do. It'd be nice to think that we're more solidified in what we've got going on, and the further we can get into design, the more accurately we can budget things. Hopefully, the more we can present that to this body, to council, get support for what we're otherwise trying to do, have fewer surprises in the future on that aspect, as well as being more accurate and even, faster getting out to people to let them know what to anticipate. I try very hard to get this time of year to notify people that are going to see construction next year, to get something out to them. You figure, though, that's really just a few months away at this point in time, and it would be wonderful to think that we have that sort of information, and we're actually doing, say, a first public informational meeting, a complete year in advance, before we want to, do anything. So they even have more time to comment, that we can think about that, and even, this body could think about what other people are commenting on to make any recommendations to staff to how we might improve it.
That was a great segue, because I was just going to recommend that we have an actual public involvement meeting where the public's suggesting, okay, this is how we use the corridor, this is what we're used to, and/or this is how we feel it needs to change, and/or here are the conditions.
We want to otherwise identify what that is, but we also don't want to make it seem like everybody has a stake in, a say in the design of what it is. Otherwise, you're going to end up with too many, things there. That's part of the reason, even within it, I think, Alder Jennings has been quoted several times as identifying that, it's not necessarily theirs to, I forget how she put it, much more eloquently than I can paraphrase even, is, but basically just, that it's, while we want their input, they shouldn't feel empowered to think that because this is in front of my house, this is exactly what I want, what I should get. I'm the taxpayer. And the problem that if you get too much of that or try to encourage it, that's exactly what you get. And sometimes it's a matter that you have to have enough of the engineering and enough to present to them, say what it is, and then look for some feedback on those. But you wouldn't want to have a workshop such that you just say, on this piece of paper, sketch out what you think this should look like, and you're going to get a lot of different things like that, and a lot of people asking, well, you asked, now why can't I get it?
Mm-hmm.
So that there's a balance there that has to be brought, into that as well. And we do, for all these projects, we do have public informational meetings. Typically, we have it, as we're wrapping up the design, so we have a little bit of wiggle room on things. The things we're technically, looking for people is if they do have, specific issues that, we're not always aware of. And we do try, usually it's through the utilities aspect of things, is, sorting out some of the issues we have, because the utilities will usually, to make sure, try not to make this too long-winded, I've been standing here a long time already, we'll do home inspections, and often that's a time where we gather a lot of information, because they'll share things, once they know what's going on, because we need to know where their utilities are coming out, and get that set up on the utility end of it, and oftentimes we'll hear from them on a variety of other things. And it may be anything from, my neighbor has they may not even know what it's called, but they're referencing, say, a carriage walk, and they want one in front of their house because they're tired of shoveling off the grass area there when their neighbor's got concrete and want that, or they want their driveway widened, or they, want, whatever else, or the fire hydrant moved out of the way from where it's located. Maybe they assume too close to their driveway, so it's extra room to, time to shovel around it, because they feel like they're shoveling not only their driveway, but then moving all that, vast there. So just any variety of things, to do, with that, that may impact them, directly. But without, like I said, trying to think, leading them on to think that they're going to get what they asked for. It's like, we definitely want their input, but we have to limit what we have, and that's why we have some of the standards, that we move forward, and how we go about this to make, many of these roads, somewhat uniform in nature, but, making sure that we are, context sensitive and do respond to the neighborhoods.
Yeah, Trevor?
Yes.
I want to second what Director Badun has been saying for the last 5 minutes or so, because over the 2 terms as an alder that I've had many instances at listening sessions and public meetings of people who, I want to give them information. I want to hear what they have to say. I had a lot of listening sessions in my first term. And I had people like you, although it was the other Scott at that time, come out and talk to people and say, this is how it is. But almost without exception, folks can pretty much, very few can see the whole picture, and very few can see, oh, this will be good for our community, this will be good for the entire area. It's so often, this is what I need right in front of me. So you have to be careful about that. You want to give them information, but maybe not throw it open so that they think that they're going to get just about everything, that they want, and people want different things. So it's kind of a real balancing act. People need to know what's going on, but they also need to know that we have professionals who really know how to design this and how to create it, and they can explain why this is the best way.
And people, you also have to tell people there are choices that people can make, and you have to make them aware of what those choices are.
That's right, yeah.
The other thing is, if you think that having project meetings is going to narrow your streets,
No.
more people will be asking for wider widths.
That's exactly right, yes.
So
By
that,
a big majority, and I think in the position we're at right now, where we would like to get a little more human scale streets, we got to build some that work. And a lot of those will not be popular, sort of like this Stosh Street.
Stash Street?
Yeah, that's what we call Stanley if you live in Point.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's exactly what happened on that situation, yeah. They wanted them wide. They didn't want anything narrowed.
so what I'm hearing is that there's obviously boundaries, and you're not a magician. Is that what
That is very true, yes.
That would be nice. So I will say this as well. I agree that there needs to be a balance struck with the public input, but I think we haven't found that balance yet, because we wouldn't exist as a commission if we did have that balance. So that's just kind of the perspective I have on our streets right now.
I'm still getting people who, we're not even talking in the public much about sidewalks, but I'm still getting people. I got a great big thing recently from a person in my district who was, just angry as heck about swales, about sidewalks. Of course, now they're all angry about TDS coming in and tearing up their lawns. But she's, we're not even in that game right now, but they think they know best sometimes, and I'm still getting that kind of thing.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Bill, Nick?
I guess my favorite thing about the design here is the bump outs.
Yeah.
And maybe not on Fremont Street, but in some other more practical applications, from riding in different cities. I do feel more protected with them. And if they could work, on bigger roads or where you have room for them, just not on the stuff like that, I think that's a fantastic idea.
It's worked well on Michigan, I think, in front of PJ's, that kind of a gradual bump out, or bump in and out.
Yeah.
And I think it works pretty well in front of the co-op at that intersection with 4th and 2nd. You're over there a lot too, so you can see that. Yeah.
And Scott, could I ask you, if you have a bump out, does it affect the utility work later on?
It could.
Something like that, or is it pretty minor?
Could potentially, if we know enough in advance, we try to work around, those sorts of issues. As a general rule, I would say, typically not. We would then just otherwise accept it, talk to utilities and identify that, there may be an instance where the curb is going to jut out and your utilities are going to go, beneath it. think that's something, better done if you know in advance, so the utilities, department themselves has an opportunity to comment to see if there is a change to what they want to propose, within there as well. Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think there's a right application for, any of these facilities. And I guess I just, want to remind something is I know sometimes it seems that if we see something and it looks very similar to what we already have, we feel, that nothing has changed and we're done the same old. And I'd like for everyone to think that just because it may look similar to what we otherwise have, we are actively as staff, looking for ways to improve things. I think in this case, all of these roads were narrowed at least somewhat, we felt was reasonable. Trying to get away, there's still several other roads outside of this area that, I can't wait to get to, but unfortunately the pavement's in good shape because, we have some super highways out there that I couldn't explain how they ever came to be. They just exist. And we'd have to look at those and try to apply, some of these things too. If there was ever a reason on some of them that I'm thinking of, can't actually think of all the streets, there's too many of them, I think, running through my head at the moment. Things like bump outs would definitely be one of the first things to come to my mind because, how else do you cross this wide expanse of pavement with that? And we definitely otherwise, would be looked to do those things, although I, also have some, there's always reservations with that too, which is even like the ones at Michigan, with that kind of bumping, because it's really a drop off here or there. We've had several issues with that. I know even talking to, as far as how even like the engineering goes, depending upon what it is, and what questions come up, you never know who we might approach to ask questions. In this case, even with the bump outs, before I saw the memo even from Trevor, just kind of asking the questions is just, between my staff and even Lisa Jacques, the personnel director, is just, what sort of issues. And it surprised me because I know that my guys don't necessarily like them so much because they can be difficult. We have a tendency to damage them, and they do become more costly over the years. But yeah, even beyond that, apparently, like even the ones in Michigan, I've been told, I haven't seen the data. So, even as far as, drivers making claims and otherwise and issues having bumps, especially when things get a little bit snowy and they don't realize where it is, and they think they have more room and they go over the top and, damage and identify it, it wasn't otherwise marked. So now we've got to also maintain it's our responsibility to market because they don't know where it is. So, depending upon where it is and how it's utilized, the amount of traffic, we've always got to think of that, because we also need to think that, what works in sunny Southern California, as nice as it is, doesn't always, work here. We don't always, even, need some things because we don't necessarily have the population, the history to do that. The change just for the sake of change is something else too. I just, I'm not a big believer in that. Like I said, just to make something look shiny new. I drive a 2006 Saturn Ion, and you see there's still a bazillion of them out there. It's like there's nothing special about it at all, but it does exactly what it functions the way I want to, in a manner that works for me. Good, safe fuel kind of vehicle. I don't want to be swayed because there's something newer and better and all out there just because it looks different to think that I need to jump onto it. And I like to always try to apply that to here is that, it's the thing, and I can't remember where I was the first heard it. It's often used, unfortunately, in politics, and I don't want to go there, but just the idea is, does it feel good or does it do good? And I can feel good about implementing something and showing everybody that, we've done something that looks different, but I also have to ask my question in the end, do I truly ultimately feel that it's going to do good to someone, and what good is it going to do? And that's ultimately what I try to make decisions, and staff tries to make decisions on is, what do we truly feel the benefit of doing this is to the public that we serve, and not just that it might be, might dress up the project and make it look as if we, as if we care. I think people in the community realize that we do, and we take this very seriously. And, even if the street, on the surface, as you look at it, looks similar to others, I think we have a long history of safety here. There aren't the concerns that rise out of that historically. I think people understand how, our streets, are utilized and how to navigate them safely. So I think it's also in the cultural that we have here and behaviors that people have. But we're definitely always looking for ways to be more innovative and try things. I don't know with whom all I've had conversations, but I know one of the things that I would like to try to get to and keep picking on Shed was like mini roundabouts. No, people on the camera aren't gonna like.
It's on
I
record,
think
by
they're-
the way, Scott.
They're great.
It's
Is
on
it
record.
on still? It's just that I think there's some great opportunities for things, like that would be for ourselves very different. I
I've
think
got a
people,
list. We should talk.
Realize that we can
A
eliminate
list of
some
intersections.
the four-way, stops and things that we have there and come up with something that works better, I think, for everybody. I think when we get to some of those areas and we want to do some redesigns, we're definitely going to be looking at, some of those. So it's not that we don't want to change anything, we definitely do, we just want to change things where we feel that makes the most sense for everybody. I've said a lot. Hopefully, I said something valuable and just didn't.
Almost sounded as though you were our pastor.
Wow.
Well, I did contemplate doing that at one point in time, so maybe that's just.
Oh, that could be it.
That makes sense.
Put her down there.
So is there any other questions for the director?
And I apologize if I got popcorn in my teeth or something like
Yeah,
that.
there you go. So I guess I will ask about the third recommendation, which was the lighting. So
The
is
lighting
that
is
something
something
that
we
can
can-
be recommended?
We can look at, it's something that, the lighting changes are typically done at the as Alder requests. And that's typically how we handle them, because again, it's a matter of although we otherwise want to balance safety, I know past directors talking to staff, past public works directors, had basically an internal policy, no mid-block lighting. The intent at the time was just to light the intersections, leave the rest of it, because, we do pay monthly for all those lights we put up. These days, many cases, there's, in addition to monthly, there's more upfront charges. It used to just be all on the end. I think, and I haven't quite followed exactly, the difference, why sometimes WPS proposes with an upfront charge, and sometimes it's just, we get like two options. You can pay upfront and then monthly at such a fee, or you can pay the whole thing. Monthly, the last couple ones I saw, had different monthly fees, but also had just varying upfront fees to do that. But we also need to be cognizant of, the people that live there. Many people don't necessarily always want that, so it's a matter of balancing the safety, that as well as personal responsibility as far as, lighting yourself and being, a safe, so if you're traveling at night, I always do is try to, take a flashlight, everything, light colored clothing, reflective clothing, things like that. I find there's an air of personal responsibility there as well. I also think as we just change some of the other lighting, we're going to find, a greater expanse in color as we change the color temperature of lights, which WPS is actively doing right now. In fact, I just had recently in Alder-Zarazua's district, we've been dealing with a complaint because of a light replacement, and the neighbors there are displeased with, the color temperature and the amount of light that this new,
It's
we
bright,
replaced
yeah.
that, what I would call a dim yellow light with a nice bright white light, which is the lowest wattage that WPS has.
Oh.
And it's otherwise seems to be too bright for everyone, so we're getting a number of complaints. And I think, quite honestly, if I had to guess, those complaints are going to only increase
Yes.
as these LEDs change up, and people are going to, be a little more disappointed with the light because it's going to be bright, as well as there is something that people talk about, light pollution. So we do need to balance that out, but we'll definitely look at those. I think what we'll end up doing, is talking to our alders to generally go through the process that we normally do, which is to, ask the residents there, part what they would like to see,
Yeah.
and then take that to council, because all those are approved at the council level. We do that because there is an ongoing cost associated with that. So each light is then taken to council for approval.
Yeah. I just wanted to weigh in on this a little bit. I've experienced that constituents have come to me asking for a light because it's so dark, or asking to sort of shade it. And you could do that. WPS will do that. Sort of put it's kind of
A flange or something?
oh yeah, I don't know what you call it, but it's like.
Shoebox.
Pardon me?
That's what they're called.
Oh.
A lampshade?
No, that's what the deflectors are called. They're called shoebox
Well,
fixtures.
I bought a house, my husband and I bought a house on Summer Street, not far from here. And the people there had been so concerned about I guess, trespassers, that they had WPS put up an enormous, enormous street light in their backyard, right in the easement. And I asked WPS to put some sort of shading over it so that it wouldn't come into my window. So, I mean, I understand that. I've had others say it's too, the LEDs now, the color, Kelvin, is it?
Therese Calvin, correct?
It's, yeah. Recently, when I was at a conference, I talked with a couple of people who were showing different LED lights for street lights. This was a Small Cities Conference here in Point. And the mayor was there too, so we kind of took a look at that. There are some lights there for street lights that have about a 3,500, 4,000 maybe.
Yes.
And they're not bright blue. They certainly throw enough light, but they're a little gentler, the kind of thing you might want in a neighborhood, I think. So that's something for us
And
to
that
look
seems to be
at.
much more the industry is going as well.
Yes.
Because most of the traditional, sodium, high-pressure sodium lights typically operate about 2,700 Kelvin. They're kind of that yellowish color.
Right.
When the LEDs first came out there, the others get the most of the white temperature, they were, many of them pushing about the 5,000
Yeah.
degree Kelvin, which is
Right.
more sort of like daylight light. And now they seem to have kind of come back from that, because they can be very obtrusive.
Yes.
The light seems to penetrate much farther. People
Yes.
that weren't impacted from before are now claiming to be impacted, so they seem to be coming back to about 3,500 seems to be where the
Yeah,
industry
the
is
two
resting.
companies I talked to said that that's what they were doing too. They were creating these lights that were more acceptable.
And a shameless plug for Public Works, if anyone wants to see otherwise new lights, there's all brand-new lights out on Highway 10 East. All those were replaced this summer.
I know they were.
Our power bill dropped tremendous from out there. Even WPS billing noticed and sent to our client contact asking what happened. They are just finishing up on Riverview, putting up lights.
Yeah.
And
I
so
was
exchanging out all
reading
those
on
lights.
this temperature of lights, though, as people are starting to put LEDs in their houses, they're getting more used, their eyes are getting more used to those colors, and they're getting more acceptance to using LEDs out on the street.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it's definitely
It's
going to be something that
psychology.
has not yet fully been decided in the industry as well, but they have toned them back, now. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they start to come back, but I don't, who knows where we'll end up. I'm guessing it probably isn't going to be up to the 5,000, because no one really wants to
Yeah.
have the feeling it gets daytime outside 24, otherwise you'll move to Alaska in the summer.
No, what happened to that wonderful dark night that environmentally is important? for
Right,
most of us?
and yeah, and that's the other part of, balancing
Yeah.
everything out is, even if they're LEDs, they still consume electricity. We're concerned about how we utilize, power, and as far as where that light is, because it can be very difficult and it can be a challenge to get the light, in the right spot where you want it. That isn't necessarily going to impact other people in a negative manner. So we may impact someone positively, we may also impact people negatively. We just hope our positive impact is more than our negative. Anything else?
Okay.
Gosh, I've talked for a long time. I do feel like a preacher. Should I do a
Thanks for
blessing
standing
or
up here with
something?
us, Scott.
For being our special guest today.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you,
Lots of
Scott.
good information, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on the recommendations? Public? Questions? Comments? All right. Well, since there are recommendations, I guess I have to ask if there is a motion or not. I think.
I think not,
Or
because,
just table it.
we have submitted stuff to them, just like them to consider them. We're not going to, he's going to come back to us with final design.
Okay.
And we're not going to take another staff report from Scott.
Novel? Novel by Scott? Okay. If there is no further, we will move on to item 6, staff update. Kyle, did you want to?
I identified in the cover page, the memo, the city is looking at applying for the 2020 grant application cycle for the Transportation Alternatives Grant, the DOT. We're currently administering that grant with the installation of 13 miles of bicycle infrastructure on existing city streets. The application deadline for that is January 24th. We've discussed at past meetings different topics that would be the best to pursue. We have received some feedback from the regional representative with the DOT, and at this point, the project that seems most appropriate, given the staff involvement and just the readiness of the project, would be a phase 2 of the bicycle infrastructure. So essentially expanding upon the 13 miles of infrastructure that's supposed to be installed next year and kind of doing a phase 2 approach for the 2020 Transportation Alternatives Grant. I will note that, while Trevor did some preliminary work, there's still some more work to be done, and we're probably going to take this before council to obtain some preliminary feedback, because with any grant, there is a city portion that the city has to cover, and we also value their feedback in terms of the project that's, again, would be the phase 2 approach. So that'll hopefully go forward to common council in December for review. And if the feedback is favorable, we would then continue to draft the narrative, create a map, and complete the application so that we could take it before the formal bodies, this body, Finance Committee, and Council for approval in January before the January 24th deadline. That's all I have for staff
all you got?
update.
Okay. Regarding this TAP proposal, the draft deadline is Friday. We got a email from Dave Muret, and this is a feedback draft. This is not
Right.
the formal
Correct.
draft. So if the city wants feedback from Wisconsin Department of Transportation, the draft is due this Friday. And so that is not ready for feedback. Also, there is a bit of a weakness, I will admit, to phase 2 and the fact that phase 1 is not complete. So with that in mind, I don't know how well it would score. So I'm unsure. I'm on the fence about it.
There's an advantage to repeatedly applying. The subliminally or something, you do much better the second time, even if it's the same grant. And a bicycle grant would be the one to go for Dave, because I used to supervise him. He commutes from Wausau and parks his car in a shared park and ride, and rides his bicycle about 8 miles a day in and out.
It's a lot of riding. Any questions for Kyle? I did have a question for Scott, I think. Did, you mentioned at the last meeting, the sidewalk continuation project would be brought forward to the commission. Is that planned for next month or February? Do you know?
It will be forthcoming. At this point in time, since the council's already taken action on that and approved what's going to be done, we're just going to move into a design. So once we get to a certain, which we've just started this week, so once we get a portion of that designed, I don't know exactly where we'll be with holidays coming up in time for next. That's one of them where we'll the latter projects that we bid in the winter. So I would think we'll try see where we are in January, but likely when we get there, I would assume most likely February.
Okay. And just so it's maybe clear to the commission, are you, when bringing it forward to the commission, the continuation project, are you looking for feedback on design or more or less feedback on prioritization of which projects, which sidewalk blocks?
Well, what I would have liked, and as I kind of alluded to last time, it went a little sideways just due to when we were out gathering field data, surveying in the areas that we were contemplating. Because one of the things before we even make decisions is sometimes we run into, other issues that may just require additional design and effort that may kind of change our thoughts on what we're doing for years. So we had come up with some preliminary stuff. I had met with Alder Dugan, and we kind of came up with what we thought was a reasonable plan. At that point in time, I was hoping to bring it here to see if this body concurred with that, in which case I would hope it would then go to, council and we would be off and running. However, it just kind of leapfrogged through here, ended up at Board of Public Works and then 2 council meetings. So 3 Mondays in a row, it was debated and discussed
Okay.
by council. So it's pretty much set in stone, and I wouldn't even think to
No.
change it. I don't even try to think
Don't
about it
touch
because
it.
I'm afraid
We
someone's
worked
going to
so
pick up the
hard.
phone and call me about it. So as far as that, so it would just be kind of I would say a kind of a cursory review to see if you see something that we don't. But otherwise, I think the intent would otherwise be is as we pick those year to year, you would simply just especially something like this year. Some maybe others clear, but you're working in an area and you want to accomplish certain things, and then when you get beyond there, you could argue, and some people did stand right in this spot, can argue, what is the decision-making process? And, as I identified there, we don't yet have this, we're working on a prioritization type model to help us make these decisions. We don't have that yet, so there's a lot of human involvement in what we're doing. And, we're trying to make a continuous network, but, you could argue, I decide to go from where we start, and we know we want to work in, I go east, someone else says, well, you should have gone west. Okay, we're really at an impasse, it's just an opinion that you have versus that, and your opinion is based on the fact that you don't want to pay the assessment fee to do that. I understand that.
Right.
But I've got to make a decision, and it really would be helpful, and that's what I really like to the board is that, so they stop calling me and saying,
Yep.
you fill in the blank, why did you make the decision to do that, is I really like for the support of this board to say, okay, yes, we concur, or, maybe let's take this approach, because, many of those just become very personal for people, much more than that, because of the, all the implications to it. There's the assessment that goes along with it, there's the maintenance,
And the landscaping.
and what people always have there. So definitely something that as we move forward, I would be looking for this body to help
Yes.
me out. So I don't feel I'm taking the burden
We can take the
completely on
heat.
my shoulders, so.
Yeah. I would really like this body to help to help support the sidewalk continuation effort. And we do need it in many places in town, not just where Washington School is, where we had the last brouhaha. But I think we need as much help as we can to, I think, explain to people why it's important. And also, I did this with a number of constituents who were really concerned, and it was a big deal. You can use these long papers to them. This is why we're doing it. This is how much it'll cost. And this is what you can do with your landscaping that's in the public right-of-way, and you knew it. And most of them did. They just were told 50 years ago, whatever, they never get sidewalks, so they didn't have to worry about it. But then that's utilities, too. It's the place for utilities, not lots of landscaping. Anyway, I did a lot of talking, and you did too, with people who were concerned. And one thing that came out of it for me, and that might be brought to council, is can we seriously reconsider assessments for sidewalks? In other words, put it on the levy. Others do that, and it's true. If you're on a corner and you've got sidewalks, it can be in the thousands. But of course, what I explain to people and write about is, however, you can get a nice installment plan after over several years. Nonetheless, $1,000 or $2,000 looks scary to people, and so I'm hoping we can have at least a discussion in council about that.
And I think that would be a good discussion. I know that's already been discussed at staff, even preceding
I wondered.
my being here. It's, because one of the things that I just, not to stay here as long as I did last time I was up here, you know, that is, of course, going to come out of that, maybe give everyone here food for
Yeah.
thought is, you know, at some point in time, we're going to have to draw a line if we would go that way. And it could be done because since we don't, it's not part of our levy,
Yeah.
we could charge, you know, whatever it might, I'm just going to throw it out. I haven't even
Yeah.
come close to calculating, so
Yeah.
I could be off by orders of magnitude. You know, it could just be at $20 per property, so to speak,
Yeah.
added to everyone's tax bill, cover sidewalk. Everybody participates, whether you have sidewalk or not.
Yeah.
Is then, you know, that sort of thing could be done, you know.
That's interesting.
But then also be prepared for the fact that you're going to draw a line in whatever year you're going to transition, and anyone before that is going to say, wait a minute,
Yep.
I just paid $1,500, I just paid $2,700.
That's right.
And now I'm going to pay annually this $20 for that, and they're not going to pay anything but $20 a year moving
That's right.
forward. And, you know, so that's always a hard thing to get over as well, is sometimes if you have enough history involved into something, that transition can be very difficult.
Yeah.
I can even say from an administrative perspective from Public Works, if we were doing that and we were, you know, wholly responsible with that, we would be able, I would envision us to be more proactive towards sidewalk repair and replacement. You know, because there wouldn't be necessarily this reason to, you know, not visit. I couldn't see why we wouldn't do an annual inspection of sidewalks, you know, or at least have that goal to do that annually. We would have a pot of money to do the repairs. You know, we could actively otherwise do that. There wouldn't be the arguments that we get from,
Yeah.
you know, resident properties saying, you know, well, this isn't that, or I want to make an attempt to try to repair this.
Yeah,
And then, you know, the ongoing
Yeah.
revisits to see how well that's lasted. I mean, honestly, people get upset. I spend a lot of time
I know.
every year going through that, as well as the phone calls that come in or the letters that come in. You know, you just replaced it 2 years ago. Now you're doing a street reconstruction, and now it's all new. Why couldn't you just, you know, wait? And again, that becomes the
Alders
question
are
is how
supposed to
long.
try to
So,
get that flack before you do,
Yeah.
or never.
so
Or
there,
you.
there could be some benefits there. You know, I don't have the answers to that yet, and that is going to involve,
Yeah.
you know, finance and other things as well too, and definitely the council. But
That's an idea.
I think that is a worthwhile, from my perspective, even thinking, even if it was just the administrative component of it, I'd say that would be a worthwhile discussion to have.
I just have a quick question. Would it be possible to somehow incorporate some of the sidewalk continuation into like safe routes to schools?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
we've done.
That is the, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Like
a
apply
big
for
premise
some
of how
grants.
we get started and how
That's
we're
right.
currently prioritizing at the
Okay.
Yep.
moment is, to-
Yeah.
and that's why we picked like this year's Washington School.
Washington School is where,
You know, so that's what, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
directly related to the sidewalk continuation, but that's, you know, one of the reasons why we're working out on, at
Right.
Walter Street,
Yep.
is to just incorporate what the recommendations for safe routes to schools. So,
Chair, can I ask one more question?
One more
Since
question.
He's up there, about sidewalks. I had a recent request from a constituent, if you're going to put sidewalks in, can we have some that are more environmentally friendly? In other words, permeable. Can we create that sort of thing?
We could do that. There may be some, you know, potential issues there, because then the question becomes is that, you know, depending upon the maintenance that the otherwise receive throughout the winter,
Yeah.
you know, they eventually will fill, if you're, you know, budding grass, you mow, you're
Yeah,
gonna get grass
yeah,
clippings, you're
yeah.
gonna get whatever on them, they are gonna eventually plug, they need to be vacuumed on a regular basis. I would otherwise say if, you know, as well as there's, you know, the way it is right now, you know, there is more cost for that, the installation, because, you know, not everybody, you know, does it. I think eventually in time, those will come down to match
Yeah.
other concrete, but it's definitely something it would be nice to otherwise do. I'm not sure, you know, right now, the city couldn't take on the burden of keeping it clean and
Right.
going, we'd have to have a program to actually vacuum those out and clean them. Yours is, it would not work unless everyone wanted, we could do that, kind of going to that $20, and now we're probably talking about
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least $200
Yeah.
per year, on average, just to make sure we generated enough revenue.
I think it's a priority. Do
So-
you want to give people a place to walk, or do you want to feel good that for a 5-foot strip in front of your house, it's, build a smaller house and you'll do it even better?
Well, there's also watershed. The watersheds are important to respect.
It is, yeah.
Well, the sidewalk acts as a dam to keep water out of your house.
Sure.
That's the way it's designed, and if you get to the permeable, you've taken that away.
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
All right. Any other questions? I think we're good here. Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. With that,
I move we adjourn.
exhausted, we adjourn at, wow, 7:22.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.